Welcome to Impatient History's The History of Telling Time, Episode 4. I'm the Impatient Historian. In the last two episodes, we covered the calendars developed by some ancient civilizations. Now, we'll discuss the very first methods used to measure smaller units of time. Beginning in the 4th millennium BC, the archaeological record shows the development of complex civilizations. People began to settle in groups, plant crops, build cities, engage in business. Rulers demanded taxes. In summary, life became more complex as societies developed urban centers. These complex societies created official calendars to order civic and religious life. But it was not enough to know what day of the year it was. As life got more complicated, urban dwellers needed to know what part of the day it was as well. Of course, on a sunny day, you can simply gauge where the sun is in the sky. Or if you wish to communicate a particular time to your friend, you could point to the place in the sky that the sun will be at that time. And there are still societies in the world that communicate time in that manner. But complex societies required more precision, and it was necessary for everyone, whether standing next to you in the sun or on the other side of the city, to agree on what time it was. Enter the hour. Now, the concept of the hour is abstract and arbitrary. It's a made-up unit of measurement invented to facilitate daily life. But it's a very useful invention. After all, if you had an audience with the pharaoh, you wouldn't want to be late. At least 5,000 years ago, the Egyptians were dividing the day and night into 12 units of time each, with sunrise and sunset marking the transition. That might not sound very impressive, but remember, they couldn't just look at their cell phones to check that a unit of time had passed. So how did they measure these smaller units? One of the earliest and simplest ways to mark the passage of time was with a shadow stick. All you needed was a straight object and a surface on which to mark units of time. Even your own shadow can help you determine the time of day or the passage of time if you have a reference point. But a more reliable way to measure the passage of hours is with a sundial. The sundial consisted of a dial, or face, and a gnomon. The word dial originates in the Latin words dies aulis, roughly of the day. Gnomon is a Greek word meaning an indicator. The gnomon protruded from a rectangular, L-shaped, circular, or semicircular face, or dial, with inscribed or drawn lines indicating the hours of the day. When the shadow of the gnomon hit a line, you knew what time it was. The Egyptians and the Babylonians were using sundials at least from 1500 BC, though the Egyptians might have had them earlier than 3000 BC. The Chinese had sundials a bit later on, and the Greeks around 500 BC. Sundials were often carved in or made from stone, and they could be small or large. These days, the obelisk in St. Peter's Square in Rome serves as a sort of giant modern sundial, marking noon and the solstices. The ancient Greeks and Romans had sundials in public squares and buildings, indicating the hours of the day. There were even portable sundials. But let's get back to hours, since the whole point of a sundial is to indicate the time of day. Why did the Egyptians decide there should be 12 hours in a day and 12 hours in a night? The ancient Egyptians recognized star groups, or decans, whose courses marked the passage of the night. Some have suggested that the Egyptians and Sumerians counted the joints of the 4 fingers, and hence the choice of the number 12. A second point of interest regarding the hour is the length of an hour in ancient times. It wasn't 60 minutes. Let me explain. Because of the Earth's tilt on its axis, the amount of time that the sun is in the sky, that is, the amount of daylight time, changes throughout the year. We have longer days in the summer and shorter days in the winter. For the past several hundred years, we've divided a complete day into 24 60-minute hours. We call these the equal hours of the day, but it wasn't always done that way. While the Egyptians, Sumerians, and others divided day and night into 12 hours each, Those 12-hour blocks were bookended by sunset and sunrise. Therefore, the length of an hour in a day and the length of an hour in a night changed throughout the year. If that doesn't make sense yet, let's examine ancient Egypt time by using our modern concept of the 60-minute hour. Midsummer in Egypt, the sun is in the sky for about 4 hours longer than it is midwinter. So, in the middle of summer, the sun is up for about 14 60-minute hours, or 840 minutes. But the ancient Egyptians divided that time block into 12 hours. So an ancient summer daylight hour in Egypt was about 70 minutes long. 6 months later, the Egyptian sun is in the sky for 10 60-minute hours, but they still divided the day by 12 hours. So an ancient Egyptian winter daylight hour was about 50 minutes long. Conversely, the winter night hours were longer than the summer night hours. Make sense? We call these the unequal hours because the length of an hour changed throughout the year. Unequal hours persisted in the West until the Middle Ages and the invention of mechanical clocks. We'll discuss mechanical clocks and where the 60-minute hour entered history in Episode 8. For now, back to sundials. Sundials could take many forms, and another type of sundial was the cylinder dial. In use as early as Roman times, a cylinder dial comprised, you guessed it, a cylinder, likely made of wood, with vertical lines denoting the date, and time markers. A gnomon protruding from the top of the dial was set to the date, and its shadow indicated the time. Now, before you get clever and try to make your own sundial at home out of sticks and paper plates, consider. As simple as these devices might look, telling time has its challenges. Sundials were designed for the latitude at which they would be used, and an accurate sundial requires other astronomical considerations. For example, the Earth's 23.5-degree tilt, and the fact that the Earth's path around the sun is an ellipse, that is, an oval, not a perfect circle, and the sun is not at the center of that ellipse. Sundials were fabulous and useful inventions, but they had an obvious limitation. Have you guessed it? Yep, they required sunlight. So how did ancient peoples tell time on cloudy days or indoors? Find out in the next episode when we'll learn how the hours could be measured without the sun. For now, thanks for watching Impatient History, the history of telling time.